Being hopeless is like being in a dark room with no way out. There are no windows, no light switch, only darkness. The longer you are inside, the harder it is to remember what it feels like to have hope. The darkness makes everything look black. Nothing in life has color or meaning. You don't know where to go or which way to turn. You don't even know if there is a way out. You start to think that you've always been there and that you will eventually die there. My name is Justin Mizu, and this is my story of addiction and my family's struggle to get help. Growing up, I was a happy kid. I always felt good, so there was no need to search for something to make me feel better. But when I was an early teenager, I started to feel really depressed. And it was then where I started to cross some of the lines that I had drawn for myself, of things that I would have never done. The first time I smoked pot, I felt really good. I was laughing and having a good time. I hadn't really felt that way in a long time, so I wanted to do it more. It didn't take long before I was smoking pot every day. The focus started to be chasing that high. I became disinterested in a lot of the things I used to do. Within 6 months of smoking my first joint, I was introduced to a new drug that I'd never heard of before. It was called crystal methamphetamine. I was given this little bag of crystals, and I didn't know the risks involved. But like I had been trying before, I tried this too. So I crushed them up and snorted them up my nose. At first, it really burned. My eyes started watering, and I didn't know how long this pain was going to last. But it didn't take long before I forgot all about the burn. It's very hard to explain to someone the feeling of trying this drug the first time. Not only do you have the physical sensation of this rush of energy flow through you and this good feeling going through your body, but you also see the world in a new way. It's like everything becomes alive, and everywhere you look, it's exactly the way you've always wanted it to be. It's like being on a mountaintop. You can see so far, and the possibilities are endless. I felt so good that I ran to every friend that I knew that did drugs, and I made them try this for the first time. I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I wanted them to feel what I was feeling. 8 days later, I was in a room all by myself. My mouth tasted like blood, my body ached. I didn't really know what I'd been doing over the last few days, and I felt that same distance from being on the ground to the mountain, except down, deep in a dark hole. When you're doing stimulants all the time, you can't sleep, you can't eat. Your brain starts not working correctly. Your neurons can't communicate effectively, and all the dopamine in your brain is all gone. So really nothing that you do in life can make you feel happy. Anything that you used to enjoy doing just feels bland and dull and useless. The only thing that can excite you or bring you any sort of happiness or relief is doing this drug again and again and again. The people around me couldn't understand why, if something's wrecking your life so much, why can't you just quit? Just stop doing it. Can't you see what you're doing to yourself? It's not that easy. You need to do this. I remember someone asking me one time, Justin, if you had a choice between your family and drugs, which way you choose? And even though everything inside of me wanted to choose my family, I knew that I would always choose the drugs. For me, the consequences didn't matter anymore. I needed this drug to survive. It didn't matter if I had to steal or break and enter or try and convince someone to give me money because I had to have it. I ended up getting in trouble with the police. I got charged with break and enter, theft, possession of stolen property, possession of drugs. My family tried to help me in any way that they could. I went to different detox and short-term rehab programs, but as a teenager, the longest that we could do was 30 days. That was never long enough for me to change my habits or to try and change the way I was living. I tried so many times to quit. I didn't want to live in this darkness, but I didn't see any way out. It got to the point where my body could no longer handle the drugs that I was putting into it. It started to shut down, and one night, my heart began to fail. Because I was so obsessed with this drug and the effects it had on my body, I knew the signs of overdose. And when I felt my chest with so much pain, shortness of breath, when I felt the left side of my body go numb, I knew what was happening. And I began to get very scared. I saw the end of my life, and it was right in front of me. From a child, I always knew the concept and the reality of eternity. And when I looked past the end of my life, I saw darkness for all of eternity, and it really scared me. In that moment, the only thing that I knew how to do was to pray. So I got down on my knees, and I prayed a really simple prayer. It was, God, I know that I'm dying, and I deserve to die. But if I do die, I want to know where I'm going. So I pray and ask that you would forgive me of everything that I have done. But if I live, I'm telling you that I want you to have my life because I don't want it any longer. After I had prayed, I still felt like I was dying, and I still saw the end of my life right in front of me. But the darkness that I had saw before was now a bright white light. A peace came over me, and I was no longer afraid to die. I can remember telling God that if I did live, if I made it through this addiction, that He could have my life because I didn't want it anymore. I had fully realized that if I'm living for myself and if I'm making all the choices for me, life doesn't work out the way that I want. When I made it out of the hospital, I was very thankful that I didn't die that night. I knew something needed to change, but I also know that I couldn't do it without some help. My uncle decided that the only way to keep me safe from myself was to have me under 24-hour-a-day care. He decided that I was going to be with him all the time. He took me to work, I slept in his house, and there was never a moment that he didn't have his eyes on me. Eventually, we found a place called Teen Challenge, a long-term treatment center for adults that I was able to go to. My family helped get me there. They drove me up to Saskatoon. And finally, this was a long-term option that I can stay at and be protected at, just like I was at my Uncle Joey's house. But it was people who had been through the same thing as me. Being at Teen Challenge was like an eye-opener for me. Going through all of these secular programs, I was always told that I had a disease, and that I would never be free of this disease because there is no cure. I will always struggle with this addiction. But going to Teen Challenge, I realized that there is real freedom that's possible. I saw people who had been clean for 9, 10, 11, 12 months. What I saw in them gave me hope that maybe I could change my life too. And maybe I didn't have a disease. Maybe I could be healed and set free from what I was feeling. It took some time, but eventually I relearned how to live my life. I had to relearn how to take care of myself, just doing normal things day to day. Throughout my time at Teen Challenge, my relationships started to get restored. My mom and I didn't have a very good relationship when I was in addiction. I was always trying to use her, and I felt that she was always trying to control me. But I remember when I was in Teen Challenge, I started to talk to her. And it just hit me, everything that I had put her through. All of those years that she was just trying to help. And I started to see her as the enemy. But in that moment, talking to her on the phone, I just had to apologize and say how sorry I was for putting her through that hell. And what amazed me most was that she accepted my apology so easily. See, she didn't want me to feel sorry for what I had done. She just wanted me to feel better and be the son she knew that I was. The road to recovery seemed like a long time at first, but everything started to happen so quickly. I started to feel good again. Those normal conversations that I always wanted to have, I was able to have. I was able to think about my future and see possibilities for what I can be and what I can do. It took a lot of mentorship and a lot of coaching. Sometimes I would feel frustrated and want to give up. But the people and the community that surrounded me always kept me moving forward. And every day was better than the last. Physically, I started to feel better. Emotionally and spiritually, I started to come alive again. And I started to really grab hold that God had a plan for my life. And that plan was better than anything that I can ever hope for myself. Teen Challenge was the place where I learned how to relive my life. But I couldn't actually go there until I was an adult. Before I went to Teen Challenge, I was driving with my uncle to work. And we were having a conversation about this very thing. And we both felt the presence of God in this one moment, and we had this burden that there needed to be a place for kids like me to go. We were both relieved that I had a place to go when I was an adult, but we couldn't imagine families with children 12 or 13 years old who would have had to wait till they were 18 to go somewhere. This experience was so impactful for my uncle that when he got home, he called his family together and he told them that we needed to do something about this need. And even though he didn't have the experience or knew how it would happen, they were going to find a way to make it happen. Hey guys, I want to thank each and everyone for listening to my story. I hope it blessed you in some way. I want you guys to understand something. My story is unique, but the story of addictions is all too common amongst teens in our country. While I was in Teen Challenge, my mom, uncle, and aunt started planning how they could put together a program to help teen kids who are struggling with addictions. They teamed up with a friend of ours named Dallas Block and started gathering a team together. It was their plan to launch a summer camp program to start roughly the same year I completed my time in Teen Challenge. It was amazing to see all that God was doing. From that first moment, God met my Uncle Joey and I in the cab of his truck to the realization of this amazing vision he had received. My Auntie Lori was reading her morning devotion one day, shortly after this idea was born. She read about building your house on the rock. Right there, she thought the name of this program should be called Rock Solid Refuge. Today, Rock Solid is a long-term, faith-based residential program for teenage boys right here in Saskatchewan. And 2017 marks the 10th year it's been running. Please lend your ears to hear the story of how Rock Solid is making an impact in our country today.
My name is Dallas Block. I have the privilege of being the Executive Director of Rock Solid Refuge. It's been amazing to be a part of this ministry from day one, to see how God is changing the hearts and lives of the young people that come here and their families. When working with young people with life-controlling issues, our goal at Rock Solid Refuge is to have everything that we do be transferable back to their home life. A lot of other programs refer to themselves as rehabilitation centers or treatment programs. And yes, on some levels we are that, but really our focus is on discipleship and mentorship. Everything we do falls under that umbrella. We have three core approaches to working with our students. The authority, role modeling, and influence. When I use the word authority, what I mean is everybody has to learn to function under reasonable boundaries and expectations. It's just a normal part of life. It's very important that our young people learn to embrace positive influence in their lives. Part of why they end up in Rock Solid in the first place is because they rejected authority, they have negative role models, and they wouldn't allow the right people to positively influence them.
I'm James Simpson, and I've been working at Rock Solid Refuge for 4 years. My official title is a youth care worker. I'm a lead, and I'm with the guys 1 week on, 1 week off. And I do various things such as teaching, the Bible. I do group devotions. I help them with personal devotions, and not only that, I do work projects. So why am I here? Well, I'm here because of my story. I grew up in an alcoholic home, which was very dysfunctional. It's no big deal for my mom and dad to scream at one another. And not only that, there wasn't what I would call a lot of love in the house. One night when I was 10, my mom and dad had a huge, massive fight. And my dad grabbed my mother by the hair, dragged her across the road, threw her into the house. And my mom said, "That's it, Jim, I've had enough." And so she proceeded to grab the whiskey bottle, grab the Valium, and down both of them. Simply put, my mother committed suicide in front of my eyes. The next day, my mom was gone. I was angry, I was bitter, I was upset. My dad decided to drown himself in the bottle for the next 4 years of his life. I was bitter, I was angry, my life, to put it mildly, spiraled completely, totally out of control. I was up for anything. My dad finally died, and then eventually I came to Canada. When I came to Canada, I had a new start. In that start, I started attending church, even though I didn't understand who God was or what he wanted to do in my life. I met this guy by the name of John, and John poured into me for absolutely no reason other than the fact of the love of Christ. And when I think about that, how amazing he spoke to me and how he actually wanted to hang out with me, a person who was completely, in my eyes, was wretched. I just couldn't care less about life. I couldn't care about anyone. Yet he cared about me. He showed me what discipleship was. He showed me what mentorship was, just for the sake of the fact that he recognized that God loved me and he would love me in return. So one of the main reasons why I'm here at Rock Solid is not because I have to be, not simply because about money or fame or fortune. What it's about is pouring into young men's life, as that John did for me, which I am forever grateful. No matter how hard it gets, no matter how tough it gets, I'm always reminded of John's example in my life, and I want to be that for others. I can never repay John for what he has done, but he said to me one time, when I was bitter and angry and mad at him, he put me up against the wall and he says, "James, God loves you. I'm gonna tell you something, that I see potential in you, God sees potential in you. The only one who doesn't see potential in you is you. But the day you realize that, God is going to use that in your life." And I want to see that so much in the guys' life that I serve, that I have a privilege and honor in sharing with. There is one story, in particular. A former student had come into the program, and he was incredibly lost, hooked on drugs, and was also here for armed robbery. And one night, he decided that was it was enough. And so he started to walk. And as he began to walk, I went after him because it's part of what I do. And so as I'm walking with him, he decided to cut across the field, and he kept on looking back. He kept on asking me, he says, "You can leave anytime that you want." And I said, "Well, I'm not leaving you, I can't." And he started to swear, and he started to throw rocks. And I kept my distance, and my staff member was with me, but he was in the van. And so we came across this patch of ice, and it was freezing. It was like -20 out. And I didn't know if I should cross it, but he started to cross. And so I had a choice. And so what was I going to do? I could stop and walk around, but I did not know where he was. So I crossed the ice. He started to run, and I started to run with him. And eventually he got away from me. And so I started to pray, and I started to ask God, like where is he? The weather's getting colder. I couldn't find him. So we found our staff corps. And when we found them, we started to look for him. we started to go after him because we realized that every single student that we have here is very, very important. And when we finally found him, he came up to us and he hugged us. And this is one point which always sticks out in my mind, is that he came up to me and he grabbed a hold of me and tears were coming down his eyes. And he says, "James, I knew you would never leave me." He says, "I knew that even though I ran, that you would follow me." And this was like 5 hours. You know, I'm not telling you this story to be perfect. I'm not telling you a story like, look at James. I'm telling you this story that there's hundreds of like this each and every day in some way, shape, or form. And the students that we come here, we desperately care because there's a future and there's a hope for their life. So today, I've been married for almost 25 years to a gal by the name of Julie, who's amazing. I also have 3 great daughters, Rachel, Kara, and Petra. And that proves that there is a future and that there is a hope. And so when I work with the guys, I try and teach them that each and every day, that even though their life is difficult now, it doesn't have to be that way. You know, I really want to pass on that in the midst of everything which happens in our lives, and especially to the students, that there is a future and there's a hope, and it is primarily through the gospel of Jesus Christ.
James's story is such a wonderful example of why we're so committed to mentoring and discipleship over being a traditional rehabilitation or treatment center. Our staff at Rock Solid really care about the young people here. Often when a student first arrives, a very common question we hear is, does anybody here even care about me? It's just amazing to watch our staff build relationships with the students that come here, and out of those relationships be able to influence them and disciple them. It's very important to Rock Solid Refuge that we create an environment that is peaceful and encourages the growth that is needing to happen in these young people's lives. Many of the young people that come to Rock Solid come from a very difficult background or family or community environment that has created a lot of challenges for them. So we want to create a culture that is like a greenhouse, encouraging that growth while they're here so they can be strong when they leave this place. Being in a rural setting is very unsettling to some of the students when they first arrive, but it really is a part of what helps us create an environment of peace, fun, and hope as we work with these young people, bringing them away from the distractions that they came from. Foundational to creating a culture of life is the fact that we are a biblically based program. We really do believe in the God who saves, loves, and transforms us for our good and His glory.
So the key ways that we seek to integrate the Christian faith into the Rock Solid Refuge program is through a number of practical ways throughout the day. So in the morning, we start off with chapel. And chapel is just made up of roughly a 15-20 minute message, and we sing a couple songs and we take some time to pray. Then as the day moves on, after supper, we go into something called level work. Level work is a system designed to introduce those who may not know about God, the gospel of Jesus Christ, or anything like that, about who He is and what Christ accomplished on the cross. And so it's a personal study time. The staff will work with the students and walk through some of those things and unpack it with them. Outside of that, a big part of the program is mentoring. And so we see the model of discipleship in the Gospels. And so each student that comes into our program, they get assigned a mentor. And that mentor is to kind of take them under their wing, share life experience, share how they've seen Christ work in their life, and pass that on firsthand through relationship with the students. Outside of that, we have devotions every night. They take different forms. So sometimes we'll have group devotions where one of the staff will share either a testimony or they'll share from the Bible. Sometimes we'll have them write out personal journals, so teaching them to reflect and process their days. And that's primarily the ways that we seek to integrate the Christian faith into the lives of these young men.
As Executive Director of Rock Solid, it's really exciting for me to think about where we've come from, where we are today, and where we're going. As you heard from Justin's story, Rock Solid Refuge was really born out of a need. We weren't necessarily the most qualified people to do what we were about to do, but we saw the need, and that need demanded a response.
So I first heard about Rock Solid when Dallas came to Miller College during my third year to do a presentation, and it sounded like something I'd really enjoy. But at the end of the day, I really had no idea what I was getting myself into.
We weren't in the new building when I first came here, and I arrived in the middle of a blizzard to these 2 farmhouses in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan.
Looking back to that first year, I seriously felt like a deer in the headlights. I'd grown up in a conservative Christian home and hadn't really had a lot of exposure to people struggling with addictions.
The kids were flying off the handle. It was definitely scary some days, but it was thrilling and exciting, and I felt like I thrived under those settings.
I felt pushed way out of my comfort zone.
So here I am. I didn't know anybody. I was in my late 30s, and it seemed like there was a bunch of young kids trying to raise other young kids.
I remember during my first summer at Rock Solid, we went to a horse camp in Alberta, and the action started right off the bat. During our first gas stop, we had a student take off through a field. We had multiple staff chasing after him, and a couple of staff didn't quite make it, wiping out in the dirt. But it ended with an amazing diving snag of the student's ankle in the middle of the field. It was one of the funniest moments, if you ask me.
As a staff, we tried to be prepared, but it was a lot of learning on the go and adjusting, and this was particularly difficult for me because I'm the kind of person that likes to have a plan and know what's what. These kids come into the program with so many struggles, and sometimes things blow up, including your plans. I was forced to be more flexible.
From the very beginning, I've loved this job because of how relational it is. Everyone is involved in discipling and mentoring these young men.
When we were still just a camp all summer long, it was a constant struggle to engage the students and keep them there. But when the camp was almost over, they'd realize they'd have to go home to the same settings they'd come from, and they would start to break down. We would begin to see serious change, and it was evident we needed a year-long program.
Since those early days, we've matured a lot as an organization and as a staff. I still look back fondly on those early years. Those young men were pouring all they had into the students here.
Looking back, I see God's hand through it all. He was protecting us and He was guiding us, and I'm so thankful for the great leadership He provided in Dallas and Orly and how they cast vision on what we were doing.
It was such a tremendous opportunity to be able to journey with the students and the staff in such a meaningful way. To this day, some of my closest relationships were formed from my time at Rock Solid.
It's an amazing privilege to be part of these students' journey. The boys come in feeling worthless and stupid and often just play it cool and don't want to try. But God gives us a glimpse of their potential, and you get the opportunity to help them realize it.
For me personally, in my own walk with the Lord, I'd say that Rock Solid was really the place where my faith was ignited. You think that you're going there to try to change people's lives, but you realize it changes you too. You realize that we're all in need of transformation. It was incredible to witness the change in the lives of the students, in my own life, and anybody who set foot in that place.
Those early years were the best of times and the worst of times. We had a lot of fun together and were simply following God's leading, but it came with a fair share of hurdles to overcome. One major challenge that Rock Solid Refuge faced by choosing to work with adolescents was the transfer of authority. Many programs have been created for adults, as adults have the ability to sign themselves into a program, unlike working with minors, where there are way more legal and moral obligations to adhere to. Everything about working with minors is far more complex and challenging. It is necessary for Rock Solid to actually take on a level of guardianship in order to work with the students here. It is a key reason no one else has taken up this work in Canada and why the work of Rock Solid Refuge is so important. One of the challenges that the students often come to Rock Solid with is a lack of work ethic. We really like the term employability skills. It's more than just the ability to do certain tasks. It's really about the character that it takes to be employable. We seek to help develop that character in our guys through having them work on various projects, like in the garden, in the community, as well as with one another. We have an amazing team of staff here at Rock Solid, but finding all the necessary competent and confident staff members we need can be very difficult, especially being located in such a rural area. There's also the fact that there are no other residential programs like ours in Canada to find anyone with experience. The students at Rock Solid come with all sorts of issues, and when a crisis arises, it's important that our staff are equipped to deal with it.
Hi, my name is Steve Frew, and I'm the Student Life Director at Rock Solid Refuge. I came here 2 years ago, and before that, I spent 20 years working in multiple residential programs, very similar to what Rock Solid Refuge does. I give leadership and direction to the crisis management component of our program. Crisis is really anyone's inability to cope, which often results in a change in their behavior. During those times, what we want to do is, number one, support them, and number two, to teach. We support in a way that reduces the risk and teach the young person new ways to cope or deal with the stresses that may come into their life. Both Dallas and I are course trainers for CPI, or Nonviolent Crisis Intervention, and all our staff are trained in crisis intervention, which really has the core value of care, welfare, safety, and security. That's what we want for our staff and our students. When crisis happens, we want to teach them new and better coping skills. We do that by looking at their thoughts and beliefs, which dictate some of their behaviors and feelings. One of the things that is absolutely essential to us is actively listening to young people. We want them to talk things out rather than act out. We want to become listeners rather than lecturers. It's really the heart of what we do and essential to them working through crisis. At Rock Solid, there are 3 types of young people that we'll see. 1, being the mature. And if they're mature, we can speak to them with a level of maturity. 2, if they're immature, we need to put limits or boundaries in place for them. And young people all need limits and boundaries. For the last type, which is really the rebellious type, they need some level of consequences because they are intentionally acting out regularly. They need boundaries and direction, and they need to realize that there is consequences to their actions. The goal of crisis intervention is really the goal of our entire program: restored relationships. That's at the heart of everything we do. We want to restore their relationships here, and we really want to restore their relationships with their families.
The support for Rock Solid Refuge is multifaceted. When it comes to financial support, it can be broken up into 2 categories. We need the infrastructure to do what we're doing, and we need the finances for the program to run annually. It costs $1 million a year for Rock Solid Refuge to run its program, and over the last 10 years, we've managed to raise millions of dollars towards the infrastructure. Our many supporters in Alberta and the people of southwestern Saskatchewan have been primary in that investment. I love to talk about the community support that Rock Solid has. It's really important to me that the people who are closest to us love what we're doing and are behind it. The Mayor of Shaunavon, the Mayor of Swift Current love what we're doing. Local businesses that endorse Rock Solid and families that get behind us doing events for us, as well as coming and volunteering, really matter to us. To date, up to 50% of our annual funds come from the community of Frontier, a town of only 400 people, from local farmers to businesses like Honeybee Manufacturing and Bethel Lutheran Church. We couldn't do what we do without their support. The prayer support, monthly donors, and incredible volunteer base at Rock Solid have been essential in building our infrastructure and creating this amazing ministry. The local communities that surround Rock Solid Refuge have really embraced our students as a part of their community.
I'm David Wyseth. This is my wife, Irene. We've been married for 33 years. I am a 3rd generation farmer here on this particular farm, and so we've been here a long time, and it just so happens that Rock Solid Refuge is 3 miles down the road, so we're the closest neighbors to Rock Solid Refuge. We've been involved with that group for right from the beginning. And I remember being at some of the early meetings before Rock Solid had really got together. And your mom was at that meeting, at one of the meetings. And so I was very aware of what was going to be happening. I have known Dallas and Marla for quite some time, even before that meeting 10 years ago. And I knew he was down in the Frontier area. And so really have appreciated that couple a whole lot for a long, long time. So that was our first initial get-together with Rock Solid Refuge. And so being the closest neighbor, we also had a son work for them for a couple years as well. And so that really helped us get to know the group. But through these years, we really do appreciate the staff, all the staff. We know the staff. We see them at church on Sundays, but we try to connect with them otherwise. They're good people, and they care about these students. And we have seen it, and we've had the opportunity to have, I believe, 9 staff at one time or other come and stay at our place. And so we've connected and got to know many, many of them very well. And it's been really a blessing. And so because of our closeness in early years, they used to have their phys ed classes at our place. And so we used to see them all the time. But we have a ball diamond out here. I've been a ball guy my whole life. We have 4 sons, 3 in Saskatoon and 1 in Regina. And so it's really nice to see these young guys come over and play baseball and to be hanging out with these guys. And Irene and I have become kind of a grandparent for a lot of the kids. We've wondered many, many times why the boys are here. What we see here at our place, we've said, these guys are fantastic young men. So respectful, so grateful. And we never ask. We don't want to know what their past is. But when the boys graduate, all the students kind of give a little history of where they were. And we can't believe it. We just really can't believe it, because in the short visits that we've had here around the farm and over at Rock Solid, we don't see anything like it. And I must admit, sometimes just seeing these boys here and some of the characteristics that they have maybe are sometimes better than other, teams that are having no issues or less issues. And so it's always been a very good experience, and we've had no trouble here whatsoever at our farm with the boys.
There are many stories of student success that we get to celebrate here at Rock Solid Refuge. One of the areas that we are excited about celebrating is the area of education. Our teachers are committed to creating an academic environment where our students have success. This translates not into just success today and tomorrow, but really into success for the rest of their lives.
I'm Cindy Wilms, and I'm the Education Director at Rock Solid Refuge. When students first come to us, they come with thick files full of failing grades. Often they've been missing a lot of school, and they can carry a lot of labels and diagnoses. When we see that, we get excited because we know that we can turn things around. By affirming their strengths and working to improve in areas of struggle, we have seen incredible success. Their grade averages go way up, they attain high school credits, and we've seen several students move on to graduate from grade 12. We are an accredited independent school supervised by the Ministry of Education. They are so impressed when they see our students go from failing grades to averages of 70s, 80s, and even 90s. As students experience success in the classroom, their confidence grows, and this equips them to experience success in other areas of life.
I remember one student coming into the program and standing at the chapel windows with him. I could tell that he was wondering, what was this whole experience going to be like? Am I going to enjoy anything here? Does anyone even care about me here? I'm being dropped off by my parents. It was just an incredible time to work with him and do all kinds of fun activities with him. And you know what? He really did have a good time here. He enjoyed the staff. He stays in touch with us because of those things that he got to do and life that he got to experience here. So that's why we incorporate all the fun activities that we do here. The sports, games. We really believe that life has been given to us to enjoy and to enjoy together. At Rock Solid Refuge, We have seen countless families that were once torn apart in so many ways be reconciled and brought back together. It's why, right from the start, we have placed a large emphasis on not only working with our students, but with their families as well. It's very important to us that the students make a healthy transition back into their families and communities and find success there. We are so thankful for all that God has done and is doing through Rock Solid Refuge, but we are looking forward to the future and what He is about to do. We know it's God's plan for a girls' center and more boys' centers across Canada as well. Friends, 12 beds for all of Canada just isn't enough. How much greater an impact could we make on Canada's youth if we could provide this program for 100 or more teens all across our nation? We already have had students come to us from as far as Vancouver Island and New Brunswick. Kids are dying and their families are desperate for help. We are passionately working and praying that God will raise up many more of these centers to bring God's transforming love to adolescents with life-controlling issues, that they might know freedom, restoration, and hope.
Hope comes like the sunrise. No matter how dark the night was or how long it was, it is soon eclipsed by the colors of the morning sky. Sometimes all it takes is a reminder, like I will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. However it comes, I know that a single ray of light coming into a dark room is enough, because that single ray is only just the beginning.